Hey guys, what's going on? It's TCG here, and today I'll be doing my branded Despia deck profile. I've won several locals with this deck, uh, and I've been doing pretty well at some bigger events, case tournaments, remote duel regionals, etc. And I figured I'd just share what I'm doing. And let's start with 3 Fallen of Albaz. Do a Cashier running around, you have to play 3. He's also now a really good form of interruption, and you want at least one in your graveyard at all times to be used as interruption and for Cartesia. But it's essentially, we can't play 2 anymore because of Cashier. Three Aluber. He's still our best searcher and a really good card in general. His negate effects are actually really good, and it's body to protect you, so you might not get OTK'd immediately. And well, I think he's not our best normal summon anymore. He's definitely still the best searcher of the deck. For the rest of the Despias, we play 1 Quem, 1 Adlib, 1 Tragedy. I am thinking of cutting down Ad Libitum, and it's not because he's a bad card, he's an insanely good card, but it's because Brandon Red isn't as important, and that's his main use. The deck is for that, and he also, now that Bestials are back in the format a little bit, it has a big target painted on his back, so he's more than likely going to get Bestial, and you're just going to lose your target for in red. And this sucks, because he's a really good card. But I like to call him the Ad Brickatomb, because he's just a brick in the hand if you draw him, and he's not particularly doing a ton because Brandon Red Chimera isn't a big part of our game plan anymore. I think personally I might replace him with a second Tragedy because of opening. Opening discard Tragedy in draw phase is great because it can play around roll really well and still get you a normal summon. You can special Quem after off of opening, discard Tragedy, and then Tragedy for Aluber. And that's really powerful play that you have there, or you can special Aluber if you already have Quem in hand, etc., etc. I think Quem personally is our best normal summon in the deck, because her ability to just generically foolish any card that mentions Fallen of Albaz is insane. And then her revival effect if a card moves from the extra deck for any reason is bonkers, because that includes stuff like Mirror Jade, which is insane. And just, she does so much for the deck. She breathes new life into this deck and allows us to play through Ash so much better now. She's also a tuner for the synchro variant fans out there. 2 Cartesia. I'm sorry, budget players, but this is a must at this point. Cartesia is an amazing card that is able to special herself if you have Fallen Rabbis on field or in grave, usually in grave. And her quick effects usually doesn't have to include herself. So that means you can fuse with anything else in your field to make like Drago's Depelia, and then use Quem to revive something like Mirror Jade. And that's a really bonkers power play. But she's just a really good card. You'll see why you have to run 2 for sure if you run my build later. For now, let's go to Albaz's friends here. Mercurier, 1 Albion, the Shrouded Dragon, and 1 Spriggan's Kit. Some people have been cutting Kit, and to be honest, I can completely get behind that, but I don't want to because she's also really good recursion and a good extender, and even under the right circumstances can be a starter. Probably the least optimal starter, but she is good for that. and is a really good card. Albion is a very good card to have. Fallen Valvez in the graveyard can, for cost, send a branded spell trap to draw a card after putting himself back. He is unfortunately, if you need to do this first thing, you are playing into Droll, which sucks. But he's a good way to get an extra card in hand, like not an extra card in hand, but get a card in hand that'll do a little more. And then Mercurier is a negate, and if he's banished from the grave, which you can do with either with a Bestial, then he searches any monster amidst Fallen Velvet, and he just has a lot of utility aside from that negate, but that monster negate is the most important thing about him. Some decks run 2, and those decks usually have a higher Bestial count, but for us, for me, I'm only playing one Sarni or one Lubellion. Lubellion's a good light target for Branded Fusion if you go for that line, and can search Saronir. And also he places Lost face up in the field, which is a card that literally reads win the game. And Saronir's Foolish effect actually benefits the deck a lot. So these two synergize better than the other Bestials with the deck, so that's why we run one apiece. For hand traps, 2 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit card is really good this format. Against Super Heavy Samurai and Pirelli in particular, this card can come up clutch. Hitting a Wakaushi and hitting the continuous Pirelli spell is very important. I can't remember what the name of that Pirelli spell is, but and then it's also good in the mirror match, especially for if they revive Quem or Albaz on your turn. And this is really good to deal with those without expending a monster negate or just losing your board presence. Unfortunately, it does not stop Lost in the Ditto, but nothing can stop Lost. 2 Ash Blossom. This is the good hand trap, but it's really good in the mirror match. Insanely good in the mirror match, actually. And it can hit a bunch of rogue decks, so it's still powerful, just there are other hand traps that are better, like the next one. 3 Droll and Lockwood. This is one of the 4 horsemen of a bad format, along with main deck Kaijus, Dark Ruler No More being played, and like heavily inside decks, and then Psyframe Gear Gamma being popular. Those are like the 4 horsemen of a bad format. But 3 Droll because this is a necessity of this format. It really hits Super Heavy Samurai really hard. And it's just good for keeping things in check right now. It also kills a lot of rogue decks, which I don't like. But yeah, necessity card. And then the last monster is 1 Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. You arguably do not need to play this in the main deck now, or it would be a side deck at best. Some other builds are trying Jiaojin. I know Galzo is trying that. But I personally just think that you can move this and potentially Expulsion to the side deck and be completely fine. This is what I think, though. I would move him to side if I can. Spells, 3 Branded Fusion. This is a win more card. If you resolve it, you're definitely winning. But now the deck can play through Ash, so if you don't resolve it, you still might win. So yeah, I think it's just a win more card at this point. However, what this card does is insane. It generates so much advantage off of a singular card that it is almost kind of ludicrous. And OCG hasn't hit to 1 because of how powerful it is. 3 Branded Opening. This is the best starter in the deck because you can play it during draw phase to play around Droll and Effect Failure. which is really good because Droll is omnipresent in the format, and Valor is seeing a lot of play too. It does not play around Ghost Mourner though, which is also starting to see some experimentation. But it's really good, especially if you do what I'm planning on doing and potentially cutting Adlib for a second tragedy, where you in draw phase opening discard tragedy and you can special summon Quem and then search Aluber, or special summon Aluber and then search Quem, whatever, it depends. Or if you have Quem in hand or Aluber in hand, you can search for something else if you want it. But this is usually how the play goes. And then the destruction prevention is really useful too. I found this coming up a lot since I am one of those unlucky saps that runs into a lot of trap tricks, destruction effects, and a lot of runic players too. And then 3 fusion deployment. This is why you play 2 Cartesia, is so that you guaranteed have 1 in your deck at all times for fusion deployment. And then also it's a really good card to summon Albaz going second, because like it really forces out an interaction on their end. It's not the best play in the world, but if they don't have a way to stop it, they just lose their extract monster, and you get Mirror Jade, and from there you probably win. But this card's nuts for this deck in particular. We are playing 3 Crossout Designator because we still very much fear Ash Blossom. We're going to want to resolve Branded Fusion if we can. We don't need to, but having Crossout in the deck increases the likelihood that we will resolve Branded Fusion. I mean, if you resolve Branded Fusion, you probably win. But yeah, it's there to stop Ash. There's 2 one-of branded spells, which are Lost and in red. In red is unfortunately a hard garnet, and I don't think it's as useful, but I still would never cut it. Lost reads win the game. It's so good. It's Magical Meltdown, but it also searches out a negate, extension, whatever you want. That mentions Fallen of Albaz is its monster. And trap decks are going to typically miss timing because a lot of their traps are win effects, or other monsters can't respond either. So it's just a really, really good card and a really hard card to deal with, which is why it typically forces out negates so easily. And for some power 1-of spells, we're playing 1 Foolish, 1 Called By. Foolish is really good for graveyard setup, and unfortunately this line plays into Droll, but if you have Foolish Tragedy for a Luber, that's a starter. But Foolish is so good to send anything you want, any monster you want from deck to grave. It just sets up the graveyard so nicely. Then Called By is Ash Hatred that also doubles as interruption on your opponent's turn if you don't need it, because it's just really good. Any graveyard effects they activate, bam, gone if you resolve this on them. It's just a really good card. I found it coming in handy during the remote duel I did, or I actually used it on a super heavy samurai player. Then for the traps, we're playing 1 Expulsion, 1 Retribution. I think that you could move Expulsion to side or keep it in main because it has purposes outside of the puppet lock, but nobody really does them unless they have to, or it's for an OTK, which is what I did once, where it took multiple turns for me to get to a battle phase where I could get him in one go, probably. And by this point, I had Expulsion set, and I realized I was just shy of lethal, so I Expulsion, tributed a fusion that already had attacked, and then went directly. And then Retribution is a solemn warning for any card that was special card, but its main effect that you use is the banish to grab 1 from graveyard back. Alright, extra deck. 2 Albion and 1 Rebellion. Kashtira is running around, so it's not a bad idea to play 2 Rebellion, but I think that we don't have to worry about Castillo for too much longer, and that they typically go for something else. And then Albion's really good because while he's in the graveyard, or at the during the end step, if he's sent to the graveyard that turn, he can set a brand spell trap. So, bonkers card. And then he triggers a bunch of other effects like Cartesia to come back if he was sent to grave. 2 Mirror Jade. This is one nutty monster. That card is insane. The non-target quick effect banish is great, but he also sends as cost, which means you can activate him under Dark Ruler no more. Under Dark Ruler, under Droplets, you can still send for cost. And then, if he leaves the field because of a bonus card, so that can be Destruction removal, Banish removal, Kaijus, anything that isn't essentially Herald of the Abyss will trigger the Mirror Jade Destruction effect. And he's so good. And he's a soft one, so you can revive him off Quem or Adlib and use him again. 1 Titaniclad, 1 Albion the Sanctifier, 1 Sprint, and 1 Rinru. I'll start off with saying this, spoilers, this will be a second Cartesia, or not Cartesia, Grand Guinal. Because I send him occasionally, but I'd rather have the second Grand Guinal for grind game. Sanctifier is Expulsion on wheels that has targeting protection. It's actually kind of crazy too, because he's a 3k beat stick, and you and Castillo just can't remove him by simply just summoning Fenrir Battle Phase. Sprint is a good card because it does play around Contact C, but more importantly, it can be made using Albaz and a monster that's special summoned by your opponent this turn. And that's really good because Albaz is now seen as interruption, rather than, oh, I have to play this for Brand Infusion. Rinbroom, I don't find myself making Rinbroom that often, but when I do make Rinbroom, he's usually been really good. But mostly I find myself with using his graveyard effect to banish himself to bring back Albaz, and then Albaz for interruption. It's been really nice. One, Grand Guinal, the Dusk Dragon. As I've mentioned, I want to up this to 2 by cutting Titaniclad, because Grand Guinal is insane, being able to dump any level 6 or higher light or dark from either deck or extra deck is really good, and is really good for grind games. And then her tag out ability into a Despia fusion is insanely good. I would love to have 2 of this card for grind game in particular. Then the Despians in the extra deck. 1 Lulu Walleth, 1 Masquerade, 1 Queritus. These cards are all insane in their own right. Usually I find myself trying to get Lulu in the graveyard, but there are times where summoning her off of Grand Guinal is actually really useful. But for the most part, she's just a good card to get in the graveyard to get Quem into rotation, or get into Cartesia if we need it. Masquerade is really good for time and really good against matchups like Gold Pride Punk, where the Punk effects now essentially make them pay double, and while it does turn on their Gold Pride stuff, if they keep paying life points, they're going to be really low really soon, and the only thing to fear is Psychic and Punisher, which if you play your cards in defense mode to play around Lightning Storm, which isn't really in the format, they're not going to really ding you for any damage. And since Pep is an activated effect, in order to really get the most mileage off of it, or to remove more stuff, they have to pay more life points. So while it is a little bit of a risk, I think the reward long term is worth the Masquerade in that matchup and other matchups. And again, he's really good for time. And then Queritus is literally an auto win in any non-fusion matchup, who also floats upon card removal into Albaz, which is again Albaz's interruption, and that's been really good. So yeah, he can just kind of auto win some matchups. A couple of my locals have been decided due to Queritus. And there's one guy who was learning Branded, and when I used Queritus and showed him how Queritus was supposed to be used, and how I refused to have hopped off Queritus ever, he was like, "No, I see the light now. Thank you for showing me that." Because I've been using Queritus essentially since I got a hold of him in the Megatins. And I've been using him before a lot of branded players even started saying, like, we cannot cut this. Then one Chimera, one Despia. I don't find myself making Chimera as often as I would like to. However, Branded and Red and Chimera are still very powerful cards, and I would not cut them, even if I'm considering cutting ad libitum. And then Despia is a crucial part of some playlines in this deck with Quem, because you can Cartesia, use Mirror Jade and a Dark for Despia, and then use Quem to revive, and now the Mirror Jade, which you've probably already spent on your turn or on their turn, and then most decks will not survive Mirror Jade being able to be used again and Despia. That'll do it for the extra deck. Let's get into the side deck here. There's some interesting choices here. 3-dimension shifter. Oops. This card's really useful, specifically against Super Heavy. Ooh, my bad. Super Heavy Samurai. This deck also hurts us to a degree, but it's well worth playing in that matchup specifically because they will die. They will have to go for a Maguska Pask probably, and or less if you have more interruptions. Plus, we can gain banish benefits off of it too. It's just a really good card against it. I resolve it against Super Heavy, I win. Then it shuts off a lot of rogue decks recursion. This can be changed for 5 Rainbow Magician or a generically good card otherwise, because I could see the argument against it. 2 Magnuma and 1 Druid's Worm, good against a lot of light and dark decks that need things to be in the grave. Good in the mirror match for targets like Branded Red that target, or if they make Albion, you bestial the Albaz and they're forced to go for something else. And it's just, the bestials are really good to have right now, especially because they can also try and stop the Iblilac, or you can use them to tribute over the Ibli, which is why they're so good. Also, Magnuma can search Albaz, which can be used on your next turn if you want. Cosmic Cyclones, we need backrow removal, especially against continuous floodgates. Like, Rivalry really hurts, Anti-Spell really hurts. Those two are some of the biggest ones. Or if you know your opponent has a card set that needs setup to use, you can draw phase that before you commit to any board in order to get rid of something that could cause you problems. Especially if you know where they place that card. Personally, I also run into a lot of like Trap Tricks and Labyrinths, so getting rid of it, back row has been really nice. 2 Gamma Seal, argument can be made that this is Santa Claus, or that this should be played at 3, and I think it goes either way. The only problem is that these trigger the floating effects for Pirelli and Mirror Jade, but I do think it's well worth playing in those matchups because you can get over this really easily and just OTK. And that's why he's really good this format in that matchup. And then 3 Dark Ruler No More. One of the 4 horsemen of a bad format is when this card sees a lot of play. But this card is just a generically good blowout card. Really good, especially because Super Heavy Samurai is running around here setting up like 6 or more negates. And being able to just shut off all their monster negates means that you can get in and break their board and set up your own stuff. And it's just really good, especially if you have enough hand traps, which Brandon doesn't typically play, but we are playing them this format, to already make their weaker plays. It does stop you from OTKing, but the trade-off is usually well worth it. And that's the deck profile for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Before you go, if you could give a like and subscribe to the channel. I know it's really hard to sit through the deck profile, but I plan on making more of these in the future, as well as streaming. I will have a link to my Twitch down there in the description, as well as channel links to Galzo TCG and Lofton TCG. Huge shoutouts to those two for helping me learn with this deck and get better at the deck. I really do recommend checking them out, especially if you're interested in playing branded. And thank you for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful time, and I'll see you in the next video.